Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Michal, very excited to be here. So, I'm going to talk about cyber today. And as a matter of fact, Nuke is out and cyber is in, and let's see why. Okay, so almost every week for the several 2 to 3 years, we hear about a cyber attack. It just constantly happens. Why? Because it's too easy to do, and the ROI for the attackers is usually high. So those are those breaches that happen, as I said a little bit a while ago, but let's look at breaches that happened in the last few months. So, for example, the Facebook attack that 90 million Facebook customers were compromised. Another recent one is the Baltimore. It happened only 6 weeks ago. The Baltimore city was attacked by a ransomware, and almost the whole city was down. And only 2 weeks ago, another important medical company in the US was breached, and about almost 8 million records were taken away. And this is very sensitive data because it's patients' data. As a matter of fact, just a week ago, the company was filing for bankruptcy because it thinks it will not be able to recuperate from the damage to its reputation. So all these breaches, and the majority of breaches that happened until now, were breaches about stealing data, or even stealing money. Why money in data? Money is clear. Why data? Because it's very easy for the attacker to convert data into money. And it's a very economical activity. But not only data is being breached and attacked. Actually, very recently, in the last year and a half, we see a lot of attack of things. So what are baby monitors and fish tanks have in common, and refrigerators? Nothing really, except for the fact that they are digital devices that are connected, and connected to the internet, or in other words, Internet of Things. And attackers now discover that it's really very efficient, from their point of view, to attack Internet of Things. And let's talk about few recent attacks. So one famous attack was an attack of a fish tank. So it's not that, what do I mean by an attack of the fish tank? The fish tank was located, it was actually an amazing fish tank in one of the biggest casinos in Las Vegas. Now, this fish tank has very sophisticated remote control systems, so you can feed and see the temperature of the fish, etc. And it was controlled from a distance. And not that the fish has anything to hide, therefore nobody thought to put any security system on the fish tank. However, because the fish tank was connected to the internet and to the corpnet of that casino, an attacker used the fact that the fish tank was not protected, penetrated the device on the fish tank. From that, moved to the corporate network. From that, did what we called, in our jargon, lateral movement, got to the database of the customers, and stole all the information. Another example of such attack, and that was actually last year, was the Mirai attack. Mirai attack was the first big IoT, Internet of Things attack. Millions of devices all over the world, also fish tanks, but baby monitors, and everything that was connected to the internet was infected by a malware. This malware was controlled from a distance by the attacker, and it created the biggest, and why did they do it? Because all those small devices are small computers. And for example, if you're an attacker and you want to do DDoS, denial of service attack, then you need a lot of computing power. Obviously, you don't like to pay for it. So they leveraged by attacking all those devices, creating a huge computing power, and created the biggest DDoS in history. So we talked about attacks, about data. We talked about things. Another interesting thing to notice is that we all know about the threat of nuclear power. And as a matter of fact, the Director of National Security in the US every year publish a report of what are the threats to the US. And for the last 70 years, the #1 threat was, no surprising, Nuke. For the first time a few months ago, it changed. The first #1 is now cyber. And Nuke was pushed to #2 as the biggest threat to the US. Why cyber is the #1 threat? It's not only because of the technology. You heard about the attack of the elections. It can affect politics. It can affect the economy. It can affect sociology. And, of course, technology, etc. So that's why it's the biggest threat, because it really spreads all over. And what's going to be the next attack front news? So everybody's talking about fake news. I'm less concerned about fake news, because fake news is just talking lies, and eventually you know it's a lie. I'm more concerned about creating faked reality. And what do I mean by that? Let's take an example from security cameras that are now all over the world. Now, if a crime is committed, the footage of the cameras can be submitted in a court of law, and people can be put to jail based on those footage. However, it's easy for an attacker, let's say that they want to frame someone, to inject wrong footage in those cameras, in those security cameras, and then innocent people will be charged with crime. And that's definitely changing the reality. Another thing is people are going to be hacked as well. We talked a lot about the fact that pacemakers and insulin pumps, if all those medical devices are controlled from a distance, and they can be attacked as well. But I'm not talking only about medical device. We all use wearables. I'm addicted to my Fitbit watch. And those are, again, computer that we wear, and it can be everywhere in our body. And it can also be hacked and obviously cause us to do wrong things, from something very innocent, but also something very dangerous. Another example, we all use our phone for navigation. And what happens if someone attacks it and brings us to the wrong place? So the attack frontiers will just grow, and people must understand that the attackers are very creative, very technology advanced, and they keep having new ideas. Okay. Another important thing to understand that it's not only the attackers, and it also has a huge business impact. As a matter of fact, the average cost of a breach right now is about $17 million per breach. By the way, when I started tracking it about a few years ago, it was 1.5 million. Okay, so it grows a lot. And that's why companies actually go out of business if they have breaches. The cost in 2021 of the total damage from cybercrime will be $8 trillion. I cannot even imagine these numbers. It has so many zeros. And I'm good at math. Okay, so what are we doing? Should we stop technology? Of course not, okay? The important thing is to make sure that we build very effective cybersecurity systems that combat and reduce the damage and reduce the effect of all those cyber criminals. However, it's not easy. It's very complicated. Why it's complicated? Because to do it right takes a lot of intelligence, a lot of technology, a lot of creativity, and a lot of solving very difficult problems. As a matter of fact, there is no one solution. Not only there is no one solution, the solution is context and situational aware. And therefore, the solution is a moving target. That's why we can't even talk about solving the equation. We can always talk about finding a good balance of the equation. And I'll explain what I mean. Why it's so difficult? Because this equation of solving the cybercrime problem has many, many dimensions. I'm going to focus today on only several. As a matter of fact, only 3 dimensions of these equations in order to illustrate why it's so complex to solve it. So the first dimension that I'm going to talk is security and usability. Let me explain you what I mean. Let's take an example from the physical world, not from cyber. In the airport, okay, there is a lot of security, right? But if we would put a lot of security on every person that goes to the airport, strong security, nobody will go to the airport anymore because it will take 10 hours until we really thoroughly check every person. So what do the physical security do in the airport? They use profiling, risk assessments. They assess the risk of every person, and they give like an average check to everybody, but the checking of the sort of dangerous people, they do it very thoroughly. Some countries use profiling, some countries say they don't. As a matter of fact, many countries, because I'm coming from Israel, I always randomly selected, okay? So even countries that don't do profiling, they claim they don't, they actually use profiling. But this is an example how you balance the security versus usability. Another dimension, another important dimension is privacy, security and privacy. We can give you, as a security provider, we can give you a lot of security. The more we know about you, the more we are able to secure you. When we know your patterns, what you're doing, etc., then we know who is trying to imitate you. However, it has a price, because we compromise your privacy. So if we want to balance it towards to the privacy, we are going to know less about you, but probably the security that we are going to provide you is less than optimal. So again, it's a trade-off, and there is no right answer. Another dimension is cost, because to secure, the more security that you put in a system, it's very costly. And we don't want to waste all the resources that we have on security. Therefore, we have to balance the cost equation as well. For example, let's say that we have 2 computer systems, 2 computer servers. One has, let's say, of a certain country. One contains all the beautiful views of this country. The other one, the computer on the right, for example, contains the most secrets of those countries. Of course, it doesn't make sense to apply the same security measurements to the 2 computers, because the damage that will happen is totally different. Okay? So this is also a trade-off we need to do. The problem with the security systems, in addition to the challenge of balancing those dimensions that I just said, is that most of the security systems that are built until now are focusing on building walls against our digital assets. And the problem is that those walls are sometimes make it very difficult to the innocent person who wants to just use a certain system, maybe to log into his bank or to log into his university. So it bothers many times the innocent people. However, the attacker finds a way to enter in, even though they have very strong walls. So just building walls doesn't make sense. I believe that we should model our security system, our cybersecurity system, after our body immune system, which is a very efficient system. First of all, most of the time, it protects us, but we don't even aware. It doesn't bother us. We can run, we can do everything we want. We don't even aware that we are being protected. However, if dangerous bacteria attack us, it will know, and it will use all the heavy artillery, all the white cells, etc. Obviously, will get fever, etc., and it will file the attacker. Another thing that it does very efficiently, and security systems don't, is that it has very low false positive. What do I mean by that? If you only have a scratch on your hand or your leg, and it's not going to danger you, the immune system does not go crazy. It will not use all the heavy artillery. And security systems have very difficult time in that. Many of them, even if they have detection, they give you a lot of alerts, bump you with information, and the poor security operator doesn't know what to do. So it's definitely a challenge for us, for the people who develop cybersecurity system to do it. Okay? And what is the solution? Or what is not the solution, or what is the approach? Artificial intelligence with the power of the cloud. That help us to build security systems that are molded like the immune system and not just walls that don't give us the right protection. Because artificial intelligence, specifically machine learning, can learn the system the same way that our immune system is learning our body. And why the cloud? Because one of the most important things in security is to get as much data as possible. And the cloud can give us all this information in one place. And we can use a lot of analytics, machine learning, etc., in order to leverage all this information in order to create the right balance. So it's artificial intelligence and the cloud. But it's very important to make sure that the system, the technology that we build, are not dictating the agenda. Because as I showed before, it's very complex balancing. And a balance that is good for one organization from one case is not good for the other. So we have to make sure that the technology does not set the agenda, but we as humans, as ethical humans, are the one that make sure that we control the agenda. So, thank you very much. I hope I explored you a little bit into the problems, the fascinating problems that we are facing in cybersecurity. And I'll be very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. We're going to take one question from Slido. And the question is, how can we as individuals protect ourselves better, starting from today? What is something that these folks can do today to make a difference?
So the first thing is to use common sense. So one thing that I would say, it cannot be the responsibility of the citizen, of the end user, to protect themselves. Because the sophistications of the attackers is so high that we cannot say, oh, every citizen or every bank users or every person is using the certain application responsible for defending themselves. No. In the same way that the citizens are not responsible to defend their life and safety. It's the responsibility of the government, of the police, etc. In the same way in cybersecurity, it's obviously the police and the country when it talks about national attacks. But, for example, when you go to the bank and you use digital banking, it's the responsibility of the bank to give you all the protection. Because you, as an innocent citizen, will make a lot of mistakes. And it's fine, because you're not an expert in security. So it's always the responsibility of the service provider to give you those defense. Having said that, everybody should activate common sense, not write their passwords on the wall and stuff like that, okay? But the majority of the responsibility is on the service provider.
Thank you, Michal.
Okay.